Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new, I'm Nicole. I actually have my college advising appointment in like an hour, and I thought that I'd do like a little rundown of just like the timeline of applying to college and then all the way into where I'm at now. Obviously, I haven't been yet, but I have some insight for seniors and I guess kind of juniors too. So this will just be like an overview of tips for like the timeline of applying to college. This is coming from someone who I only applied to 4 schools. I applied to Oregon State and the University of Oregon, my 2 in-state options, and then I applied to CU Boulder and Colorado State. And I'm going to CU Boulder. I knew what I wanted to study. I kind of knew what type of school, what size I was wanting and whatnot. So obviously a lot of the stuff can change based on like what you think you want to study if you're not sure what you want. But because I knew what I wanted, it kind of simplified the stuff. So I started seriously looking at schools, I'd say like my junior year, but kind of my sophomore too. But anywhere I traveled or anytime I was near school, I would just look and walk around the campus just to get a feel of what I liked and what I didn't. So I'd looked at Oregon State, University of Oregon, Portland State, some schools in California, some schools in Washington, all of those. Just get a feel for, do you want it to be in a big city? Do you like knowing when you're on campus versus off campus? Do you want it to be a big school? Do you want small? How many people do you think you want in your classes? And that might change as you're looking. And just like look into the financial aspect of it, because that's also really important. And then while you're at it, have like an updated resume and stuff. My class in school, we had a college and career readiness type class and we had to have a resume, but just make sure you have those things updated so when it comes time to like fill out applications for scholarships, you just have all that stuff ready, and it will just help with like listing activities. So February of 2023, my junior year, I went on a tour at University of Oregon. I had my finals week and I had a day off, and I was like, I'm just gonna go tour. And I toured with a friend, and the tour was all right. I liked the tour. I was like, okay, I could go to school here, but that was my first time looking at school seriously. And then April, so 2 months later, I went to Oregon State University's preview day, and that helped me a lot because I didn't want to necessarily go to Oregon State, but it showed me that I wanted, because I knew I wanted to study elementary education or something in that realm. It helped me see that I wanted a tight-knit education building, which Oregon State definitely has. I was kind of stuck between a bunch of different schools for that reason because I didn't love Oregon State necessarily, but UO's education program wasn't fully elementary education, which is what I was wanting. Running through all those things, like what programs do they have? Is it something you'll seriously consider? That really helped because there were some schools that I looked at that I really liked, but I knew just like reasonably I wasn't going to go, so I didn't feel a need to apply to them. And then I just kept looking at schools, but I didn't really go too deep into anything. And then the summer going to my senior year, I just made sure I had a very organized spreadsheet of the dates. You don't have to do a spreadsheet, that's just what worked for me, but I had all the dates written down of like the stuff I knew I needed to do. And I'll put a picture of what my spreadsheet looked like because there was a lot. And then June of 2023, I might have still been in school. It might have been like my last week of school or something, but I took the SAT. I only took the SAT once. I solely studied on Khan Academy. Did fine. I'm not like the highest score or anything, but it went well. I definitely could have started studying earlier, but it was okay. It was fine. And then at that point, I knew I wanted to apply early action for at least the in-state schools because those were like not necessarily my backup option because I would have been totally fine going to either of those schools, but I knew I wanted them as the option. And then July of 2023, I went to Colorado, partially for a concert, but also partially to look at CU Boulder because I'd been on the campus before. I knew I loved it. I knew that was my top school, but I needed to like actually seriously tour it. So I toured CU Boulder and Colorado State in Fort Collins. I loved both. I hadn't looked at Colorado State before, but I knew that I liked it. I did apply just as like another option because it was a bit cheaper than Boulder. So it was like a good option, but major wise it wasn't exactly what I was looking for. And then in August I made my Common App account. I'm pretty sure it was like the very beginning of August. I just wanted it started. I don't know when you can start making them. It might have been right as it started coming out, I don't know, but I made my Common App account. I didn't rush too much into it because some of the stuff it takes a bit to sit through and I was working, but just try to get the information in, start thinking about the schools you want to maybe apply to, and get as much as you can done so that when school starts you start getting busier, you just have all of the stuff started. And then I wrote my essays in a Google Doc. I remember when I first made my Common App account, I wasn't sure of what essay I wanted to write. And I was talking with one of my friends who were both kind of stuck because none of the prompts really resonated with us. But I wrote all my essays in a Google Doc. It was just easier to like fix the spelling and the grammar. And it also made it so that I had it all saved because a lot of schools will need similar essays or your scholarships are going to be pretty similar. So you can use those pieces for inspiration. I know like writing the essay felt really daunting for me. I chose the prompt about like an accomplishment or an event that sparked personal growth or like a change in perception, stuff like that, and like a new understanding. And I wrote specifically about my internship at an elementary school because one of my classes is an internship that I've been taking 3 years of high school. Most of my experience in the field and just like work experience is from that class. So I wrote about that. I started by writing like keywords and ideas of things I knew I probably wanted in my essay. I tried to pay not much attention to like the TikTok essays where like people were saying what they wrote about because it kind of overwhelmed me. So I just wrote down keywords of what I thought I might want. If I had any sentences in mind, I wrote those and then I outlined it and wrote it. Don't be afraid to change it a bunch though, because that's okay too. I had a couple different options, then I got some input from my sister and some friends of like what might be the best idea. But I tried to like narrow it down as much as I could, and then I just kept writing. And then I started school in September. I just kept working on my applications and stuff. And then in October 2023, I don't know when exactly I asked, but I asked one of my teachers for a letter of recommendation. I only needed one. Some of my schools didn't need them at all. Some wanted one. Obviously, some schools need more or less, so make sure to check that out. There's a bunch of different rules, but for my schools, some needed them. I know I asked at least 2 or 3 weeks in advance just to make sure we got it. And then while you're doing that, make sure in Common App you have like all of your security and like personal things signed so that the stuff can actually go through. And then if your school does stuff on like Naviance or another form, make sure you're doing that as well, because for mine, like I had to go and request it on Naviance and I had to do all these different things throughout my senior year, and just make sure that you're also doing that so you're staying on track. That's where like having the spreadsheet comes in handy, because you can check off what you're doing, you make sure when you did it. I knew I wanted to get my in-state applications just done and submitted, so I believe I submitted my UO and my OSU ones on the same day. I think it was October 29th, which was kind of pretty close to the deadline. I could have done it earlier, it was just my letter of rec that I was making sure I got. So I submitted those and I heard back from UO the quickest, but while you're waiting, just look into financial aid options and when things are due, because I know UO, there were some things that were due right as I got accepted. I ended up getting accepted to UO on November 2nd, and as soon as I got accepted, there were some financial aid things that I had to do to get those scholarships done and out of the way, so just make sure you're keeping track of that. And then November 4th of 2023, I submitted my applications to CU Boulder and Colorado State. And while you're just waiting, apply to every scholarship that becomes available. Typically, for most schools, when you apply, you'll get entered to the scholarship base, and like you'll be able to fill out all the applications and stuff. And I'm telling you, like, it's worth it. It seems very tedious, it seems like a lot, but a lot of schools will have just basic general applications. They'll have applications based on your major or like the college department you're going to be in, and those help a lot, because the massive scholarship I got from Boulder, where I'm going, came from just the general education scholarship that I didn't even fully realize I filled out that scholarship because it was in the general application. And then a week later, on November 11th, I was accepted to OSU, and I started hearing even more about scholarships. I know I heard back from Colorado State earlier than Boulder. I can't remember the exact date, but I'm pretty sure Boulder was in December or January. It was like around their winter break time. But as those came about, just make sure you're going into the websites, you're clicking, security things, because sometimes they can't release scholarships or information to you until you fill out certain questions, even if you're not committed to the school. So I started to hear more about scholarships. I found out like the academic merit ones that I got, and then I found out about ones that I could apply for. So there's gonna be a huge time frame where it's fully just like scholarships, maybe some housing. That's really it. And then on February 18th of 2024, I filled out my OSU housing contract. Oregon State does it where you don't have to pay anything and you can like cancel at any time. They only have you pay once you're in like a final step of it. Whereas University of Oregon, they have you pay up front. There was $50 that was non-refundable, and then like $250 or $350 that was. So I just filled it out because at the time it felt like UO was my best option. And then for Boulder, I'm pretty sure the College of Education scholarships were due sometime in March. I think, I could be wrong, but make sure you have those filled out. Make sure you turn them in. Just do your best on them, because people really will like give you money. So I filled it out, I want to say on March 12th, I could be wrong though. And then on April 6th of 2024, CU Boulder had their admitted student day, and I went to that. Loved the school. At that point, I knew that's where I wanted to go. It was just about like the financial aspect of what was going to come, what wasn't. So after that, I knew CU was my top choice, but financially UO was my top. And that was April 6th. And then I went home, started thinking about it more. I looked at all the school stuff so that if for some reason it switched and I could go to Boulder, I would kind of have all my ducks in a row. So weigh your options. Know it's okay to just like commit to one, but also if you're waiting, try to like be prepared on both ends. But on April 17th, I got an email for a massive scholarship from Boulder, specifically within the College of Education. It was for out-of-state students, and that helped a lot. And that one, you kind of just like, if you didn't accept it, it went to the next person. So that kind of, I talked with my parents about it, and I was like, if I lock this in, I'm going to Boulder. So I believe I accepted the scholarship, and then I waited for everything to go through, and then I committed to Boulder maybe a few days later. And then I also went in and I canceled my housing contract so I could get the refunds. And I went in and declined admission from the other schools just to make sure that was done. So that was in April. And then everything kind of slowed down because you'd get stuff rolling in from schools, but it was kind of like at your own pace or whatever. For Boulder, their orientation's all online. So that opened up. I did that online. Obviously, now I have my advising appointment. I made sure to sign up for my register date window. Their housing's a little different. So I filled out their housing thing on April 26th. And then the rest of my housing stuff comes throughout the summer. Make sure you're prepared for, if you need to select your dorm, if you need to find a roommate, if you don't need to find a roommate, just have all those things organized so when the time comes, you know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, talk to people, DM people, email. People are wanting to help. And then 2 days later, after I did my housing, I got my financial aid offer. So that helped with other scholarships because some of them I had to put down like how much I was getting, how much I had to pay, all that stuff. Some of them I'm still working on. But that's super helpful. And then my school uses like Naviance. So make sure that's updated. I had to put in like what school I was going to and then request transcripts from the college credits I've gotten. So those colleges and then from my high school as well. So that puts us now in June. And again, this all depends on schools. For me, there's not a lot of stuff I can do for housing except for like go dorm shopping, figure out what I want. For my twin sister who's going to Oregon State, she already knows what roommate she's gonna room with. She's kind of figuring out the building soon. So that stuff kind of depends. Typically your school will have like a portal and you'll check it out and everything. But that's kind of the timeline from like looking at schools to committing. I'd say my best tips are just try to be organized with it. It doesn't need to be like top of the line organized. You don't need to apply to that many schools. Obviously, everyone's different. Some people are like, I'm only applying to one. Some people apply to 20. That's okay. But be realistic of, does the school have a major I want to study? Does this make sense for me? Because there were some schools that I loved, but there was no way I was going to go. So it didn't make sense to pay the fee. I know my fees generally range from like $60 to $70 for applying. Also, this doesn't necessarily have to do with the college application process, but if you're in high school, take advantage of the jobs and the volunteering and just the experiences in the classes because those will help a lot for your Common App section where you're putting activities and things you've done. Having experience in not only the education field, but just other things like taking photos for your book really helped get an activity down. Even if it wasn't huge, it was still something that I've shown that I've done. But that's basically it. Thank you so much for watching. I know it's kind of like hectic. Me a year ago, I would have been totally stressed out about this, but it does come naturally. Typically, the schools have pretty organized systems that tell you what to do, but I know the Common App, you're kind of on your own unless your school really helps you out. So if you're in the boat of applying soon or looking at schools, best of luck. It's going to be great. But thank you so much for watching.